When I mention the term like mortal enemies to you, who do you think of? Like, what's the first pairing that comes to mind? Who or what hate each other so much that they would be defined, the relationship would be defined by this hate, this rivalry, this like anger? There's a couple of like classic examples, right? Like for me, first off, I think like cats and dogs, right? Cats and dogs, like these ones on the screen, pretty cute, pretty friendly, but like they generally don't behave in that way. Like I always grew up thinking that dogs ate cats. I don't know if that's the relationship, but like they don't get along. It's just this biological thing. Like you put a cat that's never seen a dog before and a dog walks into the room, they're not like, "Oh, this is great." They usually like hair back up, they're freaking out, they're hissing, and they're mad and they're upset because something is triggered in through all these instincts in their brain kick in. They are wired to be against each other. Speaking of like designed biological learned behaviors of hating the other side, maybe the next one I think of is the Oilers versus the Flames. And for me, growing up in Edmonton, this is not a hard one. I was recently at a concert in Calgary, and it was opening night for the Flames, and I was walking through kind of their White Ave type area in their city, and I saw all these Flames jerseys. I was genuinely bothered by it, like offended. I was in their city. I was a visitor. And all they're doing is cheering for the team in the same way that I cheer for my team because I was born here. If I was born in Toronto, I'd be a Leafs fan. I'd be foolish, but I still would be a Leafs fan. It wasn't their fault, but it's something in me. I just don't like it. I just couldn't handle it. I felt like I should go up to every one of them and just shake them a little bit and say, "You're cheering for the wrong team." Would have been uncomfortable for all of us, so I'm glad I didn't. But that's in me. Flames versus Oilers. Kind of just wired against each other. If you're a gamer, you follow through kind of the console wars of the last 20 years or so. If you're Team Xbox, give me a little wave. Xbox? Well, only like a couple of people. Team PlayStation? Who doesn't play games at all? All right. We're learning a little bit about our demographic here. Let me tell you. I was an Xbox guy until they came out with Spider-Man, and then New York City needed my help, so I had to get a PS5. And I tried for years. I talked up here for a long time about Jeff's journey, my struggle to find a PlayStation 5. And then this summer I found one, and I bought it immediately. I brought it home, and I explained to my wife that this was a plan to flip this PS5 and make a couple $100. That it actually wasn't a poor financial decision. It wasn't splurging, getting something I don't need. Let me tell you, I put up a Kijiji ad. I got one person asking if I would trade like a pair of shoes for it. And then I was like, this is crazy. I'm sitting home alone. My wife's at work. And that box is just sitting in the corner while I'm watching YouTube videos I've seen 100 times. And it just called to me, "Jeff, play Spider-Man." It lasted 2 days. I was being Spider-Man all over New York City. It was the best decision I could have made at that moment. It was really worth it. But needless to say, I made no money off of it whatsoever. That really backfired on me. But people will actually get really against each other. Are you a PC gamer? Are you an Xbox gamer? Are you a PlayStation 5 person? We kind of identify with these things. And this is a major billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar war that's been happening. But maybe in my life, if I could be honest with you, the one battle that is the biggest issue in my life, it's this war that's been going on between me and another group of people. Personally, me. A group of people versus me, Jeff Kiers. And that's me versus people that drive BMWs. You laugh because I think we've all been there. Either you are the BMW driver or you know the BMW driver. Let me tell you this. 99% of the time, if somebody is tailing behind me too close, making me, when someone's just a little too close, like they're not trying to do it, they're just unaware, but they're driving really aggressively, and they're like, there's like 2 lanes of traffic, no one's getting anywhere, but they're swerving into the emergency lane just to see if there's a way to do something illegal. It's always a BMW driver. And they always are all over, like guys, do you know, I want to just follow them, which would be a poor decision, and not to like fight or anything or road rage, but to just be like, "Sir, do you understand that you have this little stick on the left of your steering wheel that is for signaling?" It's a crazy idea. It's a novel concept, but it'd be really cool if you could learn how to do that. And I don't see that battle ending anytime soon. But if we're being honest, there's one battle that I keep seeing pop up over and over again that isn't funny. It's kind of concerning, it's awkward, and it seems to be really visceral. Like really, there's a lot of anger and hate and venom spewed on either side of it, and particularly from one for sure. And that's the battle between science and religion. Now, we've talked about this type of stuff semi-regularly here, and I think that's recognized and that's important and intentional, because when we look at the list of things that are causing young adults to move away from Jesus, from God, and just from like a belief in any sort of spirituality and the decline of Christianity and other religions within Canada, especially amongst young adults, this is one of the main ones that pops up. In this series, if you haven't been tuning in or you need to catch up, you can do that on our podcast or YouTube, but we're talking about all the different things that statistically are causing deconstruction of faith for young adults. It's going on everywhere. You probably have friends that have kind of just like, I don't know why I believed that when I was in a youth group. Yeah, it was fun and stuff, but all these things, I don't know if that really fits into my worldview anymore. And we want to, not hide from those, put our fingers in our ears and be like, no, just don't pay attention to those things, just focus on this. I want to hit them head on, have a conversation. Let me just give you one fact. I'm not a scientist. I'm a pastor. I am not that smart. I really am fascinated by science. I like to read a lot about it. I want to learn more and more, but I'm not a scientist, so I'm not going to be able to come up here and be like, hey, here's through the scientific model, I have my hypothesis, I have my controlled variables, I have my manipulated variables, and now I'm going to give you my conclusion, and there is no denying my thesis, my approach, my hypothesis whatsoever. But I want to go through why it's not absolutely nuts to believe in God. And that you don't have to be a flat earther, science denier, nothing is real, science is the devil, everything is so bad type of person, which I think Christians are unfairly categorized as. There's a few of us out there for sure. We've all been on Twitter before. But the fact is that you don't have to be that. You don't have to turn your brain off to follow Jesus. You don't have to not use it. Jesus gave us a brain, and he wants us to use it, right? But it shouldn't get so caught up that we can't follow him either. I really think the anger towards believing in Jesus from the scientific community, and I should say not the whole scientific community, is misplaced. There's a lot of it, though. And you don't have to look very hard. Maybe you've seen it from going to college. You've been hit with that kind of in your face, that the idea of a deity or Jesus or God is crazy and you're a moron for believing that. How could you even get accepted into this school? Or you have friends like that. But there's a lot of famous thinkers that have large followings that believe this stuff. And one that's pretty popular, you've probably heard of, is Richard Dawkins. Richard Dawkins, amongst his multiple books dedicated to disproving God, is that one of his famous quotes is actually saying that the sexual abuse that he was victim of as a child was not nearly as egregious or violent or dangerous as parents today teaching their children that God exists. Now, I would argue that that is totally misplaced, that that's not accurate and unfair, but that's his feeling, and that's what he's been teaching. That's what he says. That's a strong statement. That's a hateful statement. But he really feels that. And he has a lot of people that follow him, and maybe some of you have read some of his books or seen some of his podcasts. Another one is Stephen Hawking. Now, he's passed away, but he was a very, very smart scientist, and he said this: I regard the brain as a computer which will stop working when its components fail. He told The Guardian magazine, there's no heaven or afterlife for broken down computers. There's no reality to that, and that's a fairy tale told to people who are scared of the dark. Well, that's a dark approach to life, so I hope he's not scared of it. That's just a really negative way. When I read that, I'm like, oh man, there's just no hope to that. One of the most famous ones, and we always kind of come back to this one, is from Karl Marx, the guy who created Marxism, kind of branched off to communism, and you can kind of track it down in some ways to socialism. But he says religion is the opiate of the masses, so kind of like opioids. Like it's a mind number, it's a pain medicine. It's disconnecting disadvantaged people from the here and now and dulling their engagement in progressive politics. That's the issue. He takes a political approach to this. Which I think for a conversation for another time, there is some of that happening now where we've tried to move and legislate heaven on earth, but leave God out of that heaven that we've legislated, which might explain why it ain't working so well. But beyond that, this is a popularized thought process. The idea that if you are a Christian, you're just not intelligent enough or brave enough to realize that there's nothing. This is pointless. Your life means nothing. It all sucks, so you might as well just have as much fun as you can while you're here, right? And so he believes that. Maybe you believe that. I'm glad you're here checking this out. But for me, that just seems so dark. Like, just how do you live your life like that? Do you find peace in the darkness? Do you find peace in that? I don't know. I know Carl's long gone. I'd love to have a sit down with him, or maybe I don't, because the reality is none of these people sound like someone I want to go for wings with. Right? Very like this dark, like negative view of the world. I can't imagine there are a lot of fun at parties, but this was honestly what they thought. And it's really a very strong ethos, a very strong ideology of the world and how we represent the world around us. Many scientists, they just think that the idea of God is a dumb idea. But the reality is that not all scientists believe that. There's some examples as well, like Albert Einstein is kind of the classic one that we go to, right? He was a Christian, and I love this line, and this is really a strong point for me, is that he says, science without religion is lame. Religion without science is blind. So obviously he wasn't going to just abandon science. He was kind of like the face of science, right? You see Einstein's crazy hair, like kind of the mad scientist without the madness. And you see him and you're like, that's science. He's almost like the mascot of science, E equals MC squared. I have no clue what that means. Something to do with gravity or something like whatever. I have no clue. But I know Einstein is science. He believed that you cannot disconnect the two from each other. They rely on each other. They have this ballet with each other and correspond accordingly. There's a guy named Paul Latimer, and he was the inventor of the MRI machine. You know, like you need an ACL checked, you need to check if there's something wrong with your brain or something in your body. The MRI machine is a miraculous creation. It was something that has drastically changed medical science, and we really take it for granted at this point, I think. But he believed in God, and he was very, very, very loud about his belief that God created the universe, which in the scientific community was not very popular. He was kind of seen as an idiot, and at some point, although he invented the MRI machine, so like, oh, he's a real idiot, like clearly. But he was really scrutinized by the scientific community, and it's quite popular to believe and almost undeniable that he was passed over several times for a Nobel Prize for this creation because the scientific community saw him as just unusable. Because, you know, he did this cool thing, but he believes in God. Can't give him the prize, which I think is silly, but to each their own. Francis Collins, he was a geneticist who ran the Human Genome Project. He was convinced that the world of science and all of its marvels and incredible nature was too complex to not have God at the center of it. And he was also scrutinized, that he believed that that was a part of the creation of the universe and the continued nature of the world we live in. So, what do you do with this? If I just left you with that, I'm not sure what we're going to do. There's two sides, right? What do you do with this? It's really hard because there's people smarter than me, and I'm assuming, I'm not going to make that judgment, there might be a genius or two in here, but probably smarter than any of us in the room here, who believe opposite sides of the conversation. I'm not going to argue with the guy that created the MRI machine about science and religion, but at the same time, like logic would say, how are we going to debate Richard Dawkins or some of these other people that have these strong belief systems and know a lot and have good arguments on either side? Which PhD do I listen to? Which professor is telling the truth? I don't know. So where do you land on this? Do you find it hard to believe in God when you think about the world of sciences? Did you head to college, like I said earlier, and suddenly just face a whole bunch of backlash? Have a professor just ream you out. I've heard stories of young adults going to the U of A and different schools, and they're like, you cannot believe in this. Like, they just attack it. Not even in the sense of like, this is just incorrect, but like there's a literal war that they have to win. Does that hurt you personally? Does that change the way you view Jesus, God, the world, the universe? Are you on the fence now because of that? Or maybe you're here and you don't believe in Jesus. You've never really followed God. And this is a conversation that you're like, yeah, like, I've thought about it. I want to believe in God. I'm on the fence, but like, how do I reconcile what seems to be such foolishness with what I kind of am leaning towards, that something has got to be more than what we see? That's a tough one. You find yourself questioning your faith just because of what you read, see, and are told. But the reality is this too. When people take the approach that science is infallible, that we have it all figured out, that we just know it all, we held the whole world in our hands. I'm not going to sing the song, but you get my point. There's so many things about the universe that blow it all up. The universe is the craziest place on earth. No, the universe is wild. It's wild. The more you just got to Google it. You just got to find just any show about it. And we can all agree that like the expanse of space, the expanse of what we don't know, the amount of stars in the universe, the amount of solar systems, the amount of planets, I can't even begin to comprehend what that is. That exists. It's crazy. But can you really believe for 1 second that we have all that figured out? Science is constantly evolving. I don't want to be naive or mislead you here. Science would admit, and I believe in science. Science is real, right? But that we have it all figured out isn't accurate. And they would actually admit that and say that we're kind of progressively figuring out the universe as we go. But there's this kind of proud and arrogant perspective that, no, we got it figured out. I want to remind you of a couple of things that science thought was okay in the last 50 years. A little while ago, not that long ago, just a little bit before I was born, which isn't that long ago yet, we were putting asbestos in our walls. You know what? This would be a good thing to insulate our houses with. It wasn't. Didn't work out. We should maybe spray this bottle of DDT on all of our crops. That wasn't a good idea. All these things killed people. It was bad, and I'm actually terrified of what we're doing today. We really think we've got it all figured out, mostly because we have access to more information than ever before in our palms of our hands with smartphones and the internet. But I got to wonder what we're doing today that we're going to look at in 20 years and be like, I can't believe we put our cell phones that close to our midsections. Right? There's something that we do now that is going to be proven to not be great in the future. That's just how it is. That's a part of what happens. But to believe that we have it all wrapped up in a neat little bow, there's nothing more to learn. There's nothing unexplainable about the universe. And if you have any other way of looking at the world, that you're just a dummy and a moron and an idiot. Let's go through a couple of the ones that really are still a bit of a stretch, even in the scientific model. One is that, according to all the different mapping of science and how the universe should be based on what we know, there should be equal parts matter and antimatter in the universe. There isn't. It's closer to 51-49, which really blows up the entire concept. It takes it all and turns it upside its head. And this doesn't mean that all that science is not true and we should burn our science textbooks all out in the lobby after today. I think that would not perform well on the news in general, on social media. But what I'm saying is that we don't know why that is at this point. Even the Big Bang, there's this idea that this Big Bang happened, that all the matter in the universe is kind of compressed into this ball that was smaller than my two fists put together, and the pressure went in, it inverted, and it exploded, and that's kind of where all the energy shot out, and the universe is still expanding from that today. But at the same time, within the concepts of science and physics, we know that matter cannot be created nor destroyed. So where did that matter come from? It doesn't deny science. It doesn't break down every model. But it shows that there's something we don't know yet, something inconceivable. How did that happen? And I've talked about this just recently, so it's going to sound like this is really something that I'm really focused on. But within metaphysics, the newer sciences, these ideas that there could be multiple dimensions. Scientists believe this. It's not just people that watch Spider-Man movies. There's multiple dimensions, and that they're layered on top of each other, and every single decision you make is a new dimension. There's infinite number of scenarios that could have happened. This sounds like a movie, and it's in movies, but there are legitimate, meta-scientists that believe this stuff. Or at least say it's not crazy to believe that this could be true. The smaller that we make microchips, it's becoming a problem where, as we adapt and create new technology, chips tend to get smaller and smaller. And one of the problems that they're running into is you get to a smaller microchip, and actually the laws of physics and electricity, they start to act a little weird. The circuit doesn't complete, and they actually have a point where the electricity starts to teleport to the next part of the circuit. That doesn't make sense. But as we've learned more, there's more and more questions coming up. There's more and more things that, like 20 years ago, if you said, even just as a scientist, be like, this person's nuts. This person has no clue what they're talking about, right? Again, this doesn't prove anything. But at the end of the day, what I can say is that for me, who admits I can't prove God exists. And could we just be real for a second here? Someone challenges you on a belief in God, don't be like, well, you can't prove God doesn't exist. I can't prove that there's not raccoon superheroes flying around in the sky like thousands of kilometers up in the air. Someone probably could, but I don't have access to it right now. Can't prove a negative. It doesn't solve the problem. You could come up with any crazy, crazy idea and say, well, you can't prove it's not true. That doesn't solve anything. You can't prove it's not true, but it doesn't prove anything is true. But what I can say is this: I don't understand the universe. I believe that there are some major gaps between human understanding and all the magnificent majesty of the universe that we talked about. But I believe that God orchestrated it with a purpose. It doesn't mean science is wrong, but what I'm trying to say is that I believe that God did this. That what we see, what we experience, what we read about, God made it happen and continues to make it happen. Every miracle, every miraculous, crazy thing you think of, God did that. And I can't give you a step-by-step explanation of how that works. I can't prove that through the scientific model. But what I'm saying is, I don't know how yet. Probably until I die and go to heaven, and God can be like, here's how I did it. And then we'll know. But science, on the other side, they're doing the same thing, and what this is called is a metaphysic or a leap of faith towards something that we don't understand yet. It's like we have a good chunk of the map figured out, there's a big gap, and then we figure it's somewhere over here. We both, science and religion, if you want to put them on opposite sides, we actually are united by this metaphysic, this leap of faith towards an understanding of something beyond what we can understand right now. So what's the difference? Because I don't think it's crazy to believe God did it, but they do. I actually say science versus religion is the wrong question. Because like I said, I think that they actually are important. If you listen to Albert Einstein's quote, one without the other is not healthy. It doesn't work. They actually need to be collaborative together. One explains the other. One brings out the incredibleness of the other side. It's not science versus religion. It's not creation versus evolution. It's not dinosaurs versus no dinosaurs or whatever Christians and people tend to get caught up on some of these things. The question is this when we're talking about a scientific conversation. Is it teleological or is it dysteleological? Now, these are words that sound smart, but someone much smarter than me taught me them. Teleological means order and purpose in a plan. Dysteleological, the opposite. Chaos, no intention, completely by fluke, unbelievable. It just happened. Literally betting odds are absolutely crazy. You don't want to put your money on this one because it is no plan whatsoever. It just happened. Teleological means a plan, a purpose, an organized view of what was happening. So where do you land? Believe in science? You believe in Christianity? Believe in Jesus? Or do you not? Do you believe that the universe happened by accident with no plan or purpose and we're all just here because of one cosmic roll of the dice? Or do you believe that there has to be something? Maybe you haven't landed on Jesus yet. But you look at the universe, you just look outside your window every day, you look at society, you're like, could this really have happened totally by accident? Think about it. Where do you land? Where do you lean? Where's your struggle with this? There's a verse in the Bible, Jeremiah 29:11. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. I know the plans I have for you, and they're plans for good and not for disaster, to give you and your future hope. God is saying everything is teleological. God is saying, I have a plan for you. Before you were born, before anything bad that's happened, you happened, before any element of your life that's happened, before the universe was created, I knew your name. I knew what you would look like, sound like, and your weaknesses, your strengths. I know what your life is going to be like, and I have a plan for you. That's teleological. There's a promise of a teleological life. There's a promise of order. There's a promise of purpose. And I think with myself in my young adult years, and I know talking to lots of young adults, that this is something that we all struggle with. This isn't just a young adult thing. This is a human thing. Why am I here? Why was I put in this situation? Really, if you think about it through the lens of this is just some random thing that happened, it's pretty stinking hopeless. When bad things happen, it's hopeless. When you just think about the little bit of time we have on earth right now, that we get 80-ish years if we're lucky, that's just a pretty hopeless and meaningless and sad existence. And someone might actually say, well, look at what Karl Marx said. Jeff, you're just basically proving the point right. You just don't want to come face to face with the dark reality that there is no second chance for broken computers, like Hawkins says. But when I look at the evidence, I just think that it's not unreasonable to believe that God, who I've had an experience with, who I've met, not physically, but who's touched my heart, who has changed my life, who speaks to me and brings me hope and has come through for me in my lived experience time and time and time again. I don't think it's that nuts. Let's look at the math. The chances of you being not just here in this room today, but just being born are crazy. Now, I'm going to mess this up because it's kind of a hard thing to say, but the chances of you being born at all are 1 in 10 to the 2,685,000th exponent. So that's a 10 followed by 2,685,000 zeros. We couldn't get it all on the screen, right? It would have been a lot of work. That's a lot. I would dare say that's impossible. Now you get into the chances of all of us being in the same room, of you having the parents you have, of you being born in this country, of you being born at all. It's insane. It's unfathomable. It's unreasonable. It's illogical. Do you really believe that it's crazy to think that that wasn't just an accident? That the chances of that, I'm not comfortable drawing straws where there's 10 people to see who has to clean up or something like that, or who has to drive or pay for gas. I think those odds are really bad. This is insane, but it's accurate. Do you really believe it's a fluke? Could it really just be a fluke? Are you an accident? Is this an accident? Are we all just hurling through the universe on this spaceship planet thing that's spinning at billions of miles an hour for no reason, just waiting for an asteroid to hit us or a nuclear bomb to go off with no reason whatsoever? No! There's a plan for your life. You were made with a purpose. There's a God who cares about you, who designed you, who knows you, who sent his son to die on the cross for us. God on earth, Jesus, to die on a cross so that no matter what you've done, no matter who you've been, no matter where you've been at all, no matter what your circumstances, if you're rich, if you're poor, what your ethnic background is, you are worthy of Jesus dying on the cross for you. So that you could be forgiven of your sins, so you could be connected to God. Because you weren't an accident, and he wants relationship with you. And he makes that available to every single one of us that just makes the decision, I will make the best decision that I could ever make in my life, and that's to follow Jesus. It's open to you tonight. You're listening online. You're here in person. It's available to you. You've been running from it. You used to believe in it. It's available to you. There's a plan for your life, and God is just saying, take it. Accept it. When we're talking about this stuff, there is so many things that are difficult to navigate, right? It's a hard conversation. There's so many, honestly, every argument I gave here today, I'm sure there's some scientists who are like, but actually, if you go a little further down this way, it actually proves that your point is wrong. But then there's another one over here who's like, well, actually, this guy is also mistaken. And it's just a chain of events over and over and over again. It's exhausting. But what I land on is this, is once you recognize that this can't be an accident, once you believe that there's something that seems like a cop-out, but it really brings me comfort and brings perspective. And it's the most simple thing ever. And one of my Bible college professors taught me this. The first words in the Bible, in Genesis, first book, in the beginning, God. If you can wrap your head around this, everything else comes together. Because in the beginning, God. Before everything else, God. Before any fight between any of these things, God. Everything comes from God. Once you comprehend that in the beginning it was God and everything else, no matter how we understand it or don't, it was God. And we may not understand every bit of that, but in the beginning it was God. God is in control. The same God that created the universe, that somehow put everything into the network of events that happen, that continue to happen, as unbelievable or as crazy as they are. In the beginning, God knew you, was waiting for you, was ready for you, knew everything about you, and values you and loves you now. The reality is this: Jesus isn't something you can find in a textbook. I can try and give you all the examples or the arguments that I could. It doesn't work that way. But what you need to do is move your pride and your ego to the side and be open to the idea that there is something more to life than what we can know. We cannot possess all the keys to the universe in our hands. We're just human beings. You don't need to throw away your intelligence, just your ego and your pride at the door to really understand what it is. So whether you believe the world was created in 7 literal days or whether you believe it was millions of years, it's fundamental, and this is key, fundamental that Jesus is at the center of your creation story. Because the fact is, until you die, you're not going to know exactly how everything fell into place. It doesn't matter what degree you have. It doesn't matter what you've read. It doesn't matter how well you can articulate an argument, how well you can talk. But the key to life and happiness is the cross. It's Jesus. It's the joy and the peace and the purpose and the forgiveness for any mistake, any sin you've made that comes from following Jesus Christ who died for you. I cannot stress that enough. Do not get so caught up in all of the nuts and bolts of the world that you miss out on the Savior, on Jesus, on God in front of you who wants to have relationship with you. You tonight have an opportunity to connect with the God that created the expanses of the universe. You can do that right now. You can do that this evening. Don't miss out. Don't get caught up in all of this, the bits and pieces, all the cobwebs and dust that come on this side of things, and miss out on the joy that comes from following Jesus. You don't have to turn off your brain. You just have to open your heart. There's a verse in the Bible, Paul, who's a pastor who writes to a bunch of churches that he started in the second half of the Bible, and it captures this, and it's in 1 Corinthians 1:18. It says, the message of the cross is foolish to those who are headed for destruction, but we who are being saved know it is the very power of God. As the scriptures say, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise and discard the intelligence of the intelligent. So where does this leave the philosophers, the scholars, and the world's brilliant debaters? God has made the wisdom of this world look foolish, since God in his wisdom saw that the world would never know him. Sorry, move around here. Through human wisdom, and he used our foolish preaching to save those who believe. It is foolish to the Jews who ask for signs from heaven, and is foolish to the Greeks who seek human wisdom. So when we preach that Christ was crucified, the Jews are offended, and the Gentiles say, it's all nonsense. But to those called by God to salvation, both Jews and Gentiles, Christ is the power of God and the wisdom of God. This foolish plan of God is wiser than the wisest of human plans, and God's weakness is stronger than the greatest of human strength. What Paul is saying here is that the plans of God, you're never going to philosophize. You're never going to be this intelligent, super smart scientist who can put all the pieces together. And that's by design. God is different than us. Science is good, but when science becomes about our ego and trying to create this control of the universe or to deny God, I think we do this without even realizing it sometimes. We want to look at science and we want to have this standoffish approach where we say, all that is nonsense, it's not realistic, it's stupid, and if you believe in it, you're dumb, because we want to have this plausible deniability, this barrier between us and accountability. That there could be something more than the universe that we see in front of us, than what we can measure, than what we can comprehend right now. Because when we just say it's all fluff and it's all just kind of by chance, we don't have to be accountable to anything. There's no standards. We can do what we want. We can sin. We'll be happy, but we'll find nothing of purpose. And in the end, we won't be happy because there's an emptiness that comes at the end of those things. Following Jesus is a lot harder. You might be scrutinized, as we've talked about. So be it. So be it. You might have to say no to a few things. In fact, you will. That's the best way to live your life, even if you're not aware of it yet. It's worth following. And even if it isn't easy, it's worth it. And I want you to know what that's like. Like I said, you have that opportunity tonight. That opportunity to move beyond just a debate between two sides that really should just come together and admit one thing. And that's that if we let go of our pride, if we let go of our ego, really the more we learn about science, the more science uncovers cool facts about the universe, the more we should learn that we aren't in control. To say that we hold the masters and the keys of the universe in our hands is like, and that we control this thing and have it all figured out is like grabbing a single grain of sand and be like, look, I got the whole beach. It doesn't work like that. But there's something more than just knowledge and pride. There's something more than just what we can measure in the moment, and that's a God, that's Jesus, who loves you, wants relationship with you, wants to change your life, who wants to take your brokenness and take your sadness, your depression, your anxiety, and your hopelessness and bring hope into your life. When Jesus is at the center of everything, then we realize that the more cool things we learn, it just brings us closer to God. It shows us more that we're not in control. And that may make you feel uncomfortable, but there's no place of greater peace than recognizing that you don't have to be in control. That God is there. God controls everything, and He has your back. Jesus wants relationship with you. So tonight, maybe it's the first time you've contemplated this. Maybe you, like I said earlier, you've been kind of running from your faith and you're like, I don't know. Or you've been on the fence. You're like, yeah, you know, that thing that professor said, or my friends, or I saw this video. All these things, I've been kind of not, destroying it, but I'm slowly deconstructing my faith, and I'm just not, maybe I'm agnostic. Maybe I don't believe in all these things. Let's have those conversations and work through what that means for you. But I want you to know this is your opportunity to recapture what it means to have hope in your life, to make the best decision, maybe for the second time, if not the first, to make Jesus Lord of your life and follow Him. It's as simple as just opening your heart. So if that's you tonight, I just want to pray with you. You can pray in your head, you can kind of whisper it out loud, whatever you want to do, but just pray along with me if that's something that you would like. We just say, Jesus, thank you that you died on the cross. We thank you that we're forgiven of our sins. We thank you that there's this amazing, we look at all the cool things in the universe and we're in such wonder. Wow, I can't believe that you did all that, and we're talking to you right now. We could talk to you anytime. It's mind-blowing. But Jesus, we recognize that we need you, that we don't hold the world in our hands, that you are necessary, that you're worth following. And so for us all here today, and for those making that decision, I give you my life. I recognize my sin. I know I have a long way to go, that there's so many things to kind of figure out in a Jesus-based life, but all that's important, and I give it to you right now. All that matters is that you are Lord of my life, that I follow you, that I choose to follow you and emulate everything about you. And I pray that you would just be with me, come in my heart, and just guide me, Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, amen. And if that's you, after the service, we'd love for you to come and find one of our pastors or head to the info booth. We want to celebrate with you and want to get you some next steps and how to follow that. We're going to throw actually a QR code up on the screen, and you can go there, or sorry, a QR code, it's a link, and you can go there and fill out some information. We want to get in contact with you and celebrate and just help you through the process of what a Jesus-based life may look like for you as well.